Welcome to my channel. If you love your true crime dark, a little messy, and proudly queer, you're in the right place. And while you're here, be a dear. Hit that like and subscribe button and share it with someone who also lives for the drama. This is LGBT. Let's get back to talking. I'm Niko. Around here, we tell stories about queer lives. The ones that ended in headlines, or never made it that far. Some were victims, some were villains. Most were complicated. So, pour a drink, take a breath. Let's get back to talking. There are killers who want power. There are killers who want control. And then there are killers who want something much stranger. They don't just want to end a life, they want to become it. Tonight, we're talking about Hadden Clark, a man whose crimes weren't just violent, but theatrical. A man obsessed with transformation, imitation, and consumption. A man who's blurred the lines between identity and annihilation so completely that even seasoned investigators struggled to understand where the performance ended and the pathology began. This is not a story about genius. It's not a story about mystery. It's a story about obsession, untreated mental illness, misogyny, and the dangerous fantasy that someone else's life might fit better than your own. Clark was born in 1952 into a wealthy, well-connected family in Maryland. Old money, country clubs, political connections. The kind of background that insulates dysfunction until it rots from the inside out. From an early age, Clark exhibited violent fantasies, cruelty towards animals, and a fixation on dominance. He was also reportedly abused by his mother, a woman described as controlling, emasculating, and emotionally brutal. And here's where things get complicated. Clark struggled with gender identity, self-loathing, and dissociation. He sometimes dressed as women, not as an expression of joy or self-expression, but as a mechanism of escape, a way to disappear into someone else. So let me be crystal clear. Queerness does not create violence. But shame, repression, untreated psychosis, and entitlement absolutely can. Clark wasn't exploring who he was running from himself. In 1986, Clark murdered 21-year-old Michelle Dorr in New Jersey. Michelle was young, social, loved music. She worked at a deli and had an entire future that never got to happen. Clark met her through her boyfriend. There was no dramatic buildup, no long stalking narrative, just opportunity and entitlement. After killing Michelle, Clark did something chillingly specific. He impersonated her. He wore her clothes. He called her family. He spoke in her voice, not to taunt them, but to inhabit her. As if by stepping into her life, he could erase the fact that he had destroyed it. Her body was later found in a freezer. Already, we see the pattern forming. Kill, consume, replace. Clark drifted across states, working odd jobs, living transiently, spiraling deeper into delusion. He began to believe he was superior, smarter, more deserving. He fantasized about cannibalism, not just as violence, but as transformation. To him, eating someone meant absorbing them, taking their essence, wearing them from the inside out. This wasn't hunger. It was identity theft in its most literal form. In 1992, Clark was hired as a handyman by 53-year-old Nancy Daugherty in Virginia. Nancy was kind, trusting, the kind of woman who believed helping people was inherently good. Clark repaid that kindness by stabbing her to death. And then, once again, he stepped into her life. He wore her clothes, used her credit cards, lived in her home. He told people he was Nancy. And after her murder, Clark ate parts of her body, later admitting he cooked and consumed pieces of her flesh. Not out of necessity, out of ritual. Clark was eventually arrested after using Nancy's car and financial accounts. During interrogation, he confessed, but in fragments. He drifted between lucidity and fantasy, sometimes remorseful, sometimes smug, sometimes theatrical. At one point, he claimed to have committed dozens of murders. Most of those claims were false. Because here's the thing about Hadden Clark. He didn't just want to kill. He wanted to be seen. Even in custody, the performance never stopped. Clark was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and other severe disorders. His mental illness is real. His delusions were real. But so were his choices. He knew right from wrong. He hid evidence. He fled crime scenes. Mental illness explains behavior. It does not excuse it. And it especially does not excuse the way his victims were reduced to costumes. Michelle Dorr was not a role to be played. Nancy Daugherty was not a character to be worn. They were women with lives, relationships, routines, and futures. And Hadden Clark didn't just take those futures. He tried to overwrite them. That is the deepest violence of all. Because sometimes the danger isn't loud. It's polite, helpful, soft-spoken. Because sometimes the fantasy of becoming someone else is just a mask for entitlement. And because when we talk about true crime, especially queer-adjacent narratives, we have to be careful not to romanticize suffering or mistake pathology for profundity. Hadden Clark was not fascinating because he was complex. He was horrifying because he believed other people existed to complete him. You've been listening to LGBT. Let's get back to talking. I'm Niko, your host, your narrator, your slightly too interested gay friend with a microphone. And every week, we dig into queer lives, brushed out of the margins. The victims, the villains, and the beautifully complicated ones in between. If you like tonight's story, go ahead and follow, subscribe, and leave a comment. Or just whisper sweet nothings into the void. I hear everything. Until next time, pour a drink, take a breath. Let's get back to talking.